Welcome back to IBTV's MMA show, Takedown. I'm Evan Hertzog, Grinders fitness trainer and head coach, right? You're a head coach?
Yep.
Yeah, he is the coach at Grinders Gym up in Northglenn. And this is our third and final segment for our first show. It's been a pleasure. Been fun. And this one is we're going to do an open discussion on this one. Probably, I know on some of the other shows on IBTV, this is one of the favorite segments, so I'll kind of let you start out with this one, Albert. Anything you want to talk about from last night? We've covered the title fights, but what else kind of stood out to you?
You know what stood out to me was Michael Chandler. I just really appreciate the way he carries himself as a professional fighter, as an athlete. I like his style of fighting, but then on top of that, he is the ultimate company man. He's the ultimate company man. He just tied Bellator's record for most wins in Bellator, so he has 14 wins with them now. And to me, that's a big deal, you know. And then even going further, they had talked to him about rematches and this kind of stuff, and he said, "Well, I'm not really interested in it, but if that's what Coker wants, I am a company man, so that's what we'll do." You know, and just to have that kind of guy, because clearly he's a marketable guy. He's got talent. He's been the champion, numerous times. I know there's been offers from the UFC. There had to have been offers from the UFC and other
you would think
promotions, you know. So for him to turn those things down and just stick with Bellator, you know, and be happy where he's at and really appreciate the promotion he's in, you know. To me, it's a shame that he's not in UFC because I think there's better fights for him there. But, you know, there's something to be said for actually being a loyal company guy, you know, and just kind of doing your thing, you know. He's happy, and to me that makes me happy, you know. He deserves it. He's an awesome fighter.
I would agree with that, and I would agree that there's had to have been some sort of offer. With the success that Eddie Alvarez has had on the move over, and just the fact that he became a world champion at the highest level in the UFC, and those wars that him and Michael had, you know, some of the best fights in any organization's history. I gotta wonder if we don't see him maybe make that jump at some point, but it's hard to say because he is such a company man. I think his loyalty completely lies with Scott Coker, and normally maybe 5 years ago you would say to a fault, because like you said, the better fights are at the UFC, and sometimes the champion at UFC's level is considered the baddest. But now with the Reebok deal, with certain money aspects going on with the UFC, I think it makes sense for Chandler to ride out his career as one of the greatest Bellator fighters of all time, and he's probably not going to come anywhere close to getting that money that he got at Bellator with UFC, unless the UFC changes their entire kind of platform that they're going on, which we might see because of all the blowback it's gone, and they've seen more fighters leave than they ever have at this point. So I think that's interesting to see whether he is, fine with being a multiple-time champion at Bellator, all-time wins guy at Bellator, and just a straight company man, or if at some point, he's getting a little bit older, he does decide to try to make that one run in the UFC because he's seen what Alvarez has done.
Yeah, to me it's really interesting to see how when that's going to kick in, that urge for competition. You can't tell me you wouldn't want to watch Michael Chandler versus Conor McGregor, Michael Chandler versus Nurmagomedov.
Oh, that's the fight.
Guys, to me, those are amazing fights. At what point does the competitor in Chandler step in and say, wait a second, I want to put these guys' heads on my mantle. You know what I'm saying?
Chandler Gaethje?
Exactly.
Goodness.
There's great fights for him there, and he's fought everybody that Bellator has. Obviously, he's got 14
some of them multiple
banner,
times.
So, yeah, at what point does he say, okay, you know what, enough's enough? I want to go get these guys. If you want to hunt the big dogs, then, go get them.
He got a taste, he, quite frankly, whooped Benson Henderson, right when Benson, talk about kind of a backfire for Bellator, and that kind of showed the UFC smarts on letting Benson kind of walk at that point in time, even though he was going up in weight, winning fights. He struggled at Bellator.
Right.
And, one of those reasons is your man Michael Chandler, he didn't give him a warm welcome. And I think you would see a lot of that. I love those matchups. Khabib, Chandler.
I think that's a great matchup. I think that would be a really, really fun fight. And what makes that interesting too is on top of Chandler's wrestling is the power he's got in his hands. How does Nurmagomedov deal with that? If he can't get the takedowns, because we already know that's where Nurmagomedov wants to be.
But we haven't seen Khabib. I'm just going to call him Khabib. We haven't seen Khabib not get the takedown.
Right.
So
everybody knows it's coming, but nobody can do anything about it. Nobody can stop it.
And now I was a little suspect after his fight with Michael Johnson. We saw him kind of get a little bit wobble for literally maybe 1 second. Everybody made a huge deal about it. Khabib's chin is suspect. If Conor touched him with his left in that same way, he would go down. But we just saw him destroy Edson Barboza.
Yeah.
Destroy him and eat multiple head kicks from the fastest switch kicker in my opinion. I don't know, you're a coach and you train fighters, but that guy kicks harder and faster than most at most weight classes. And Khabib shrugged it off, walked straight down, and tormented Edson Barboza. Took him down and beat him like he does everybody.
Right.
While we're with Khabib, I guess, and I think, finishing up with Chandler, I think it could be a huge thing for him if he just went over there and got these fights. Because talking about some of these matchups now, that quite honestly I haven't even, entertained in my own head because he's such a company guy.
Right.
But when you get to talking about him as an MMA fan, it's like, oh, geez, I wish he would make that jump. But I'm asking as a fan for him to probably take a pay cut,
right,
along, amongst other things. So
that's hard to do when you're the man. 14 wins, he's got to be getting paid great. It's hard to pack up and move.
I agree. But let's move in. I wanted to talk about something else, but now that we've talked about Khabib, this fight is official. Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Tony Ferguson. This is, I believe, the third time they've made this fight, so I'm not holding my breath. The most recent in New York City I believe it was December, Khabib, the famous tiramisu incident.
Right.
He doesn't make weight. He ends up going to the hospital, never even makes it to the weigh-in. His injury stopped him before. Ferguson showed up every single time. And so he has that kind of mental edge over Khabib. But let's hope this does. Let's say it looks like Khabib has his weight under control. He came in on point all of fight week this last time. Right. He's even talking about maybe going down to featherweight, which to me is crazy. He should just relax and keep the nutrition where it's at. But if this fight actually happens, how do you see it going? Can Tony, because I don't think Tony can stop the takedown, but I think I don't think Khabib's ever fought someone with that 10th Planet style, right, that rubber guard style, that Eddie Bravo tutelage. And Tony's long, and he gives people a lot of problems on his back, from his back. He's constantly shooting for submissions from his back. How do you see it going? Because I see a great fight. I see Khabib kind of taking it over at the end, but I think he's in danger of getting triangled or getting his arm snapped.
I've been on Khabib's train the whole time. I think he's head and shoulders above everybody else in that weight class. Personally, I think Ferguson is the toughest matchup for him personally. Style-wise, Ferguson presents a lot of problems for everybody, really. But style-wise, I think this is the toughest one you can get. I think Khabib smashes McGregor. I don't think that fight's even close. That probably doesn't even go 2 rounds, and that's my opinion. But
which is why Conor's willing to. He wants these guys to play it out. He's willing to get stripped, and we'll save that for another show. But I think there's a reason why he's hoping that Tony can handle him. I think he sees the matchup with Tony a lot easier than Khabib.
Personally, McGregor doesn't need the money. Okay, we know that. So yeah. Conor doesn't need the money. But personally, I would have liked to see Conor fight Ferguson and then have Khabib fight the winner of that. I think Ferguson and McGregor would be a really fun fight. But
I think the lead up to that fight would be a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, they both talk a lot.
Yeah, I think McGregor, Khabib in Russia is the biggest thing maybe MMA's ever had.
Dana says they're working on it. He says they're working on Russia, so we'll see if they get into a new territory.
Yeah, we'll see. And it all starts with who's able to, if the fight happens, because like I said, I've got my hopes up for this matchup multiple times, but if that fight happens, apparently it's going to be for the real belt. Dana hasn't officially stripped him yet. I saw him dodging questions all week, but saying that this would be for the real belt. So I'm not sure. He was kind of speaking out the side of his mouth pretty much all week.
Right.
So that doesn't make sense. But if it happens, the winner with McGregor, wherever, both those fights are going to be big fights. We'll have plenty of time to talk about them going forward. But I think that's probably a good cliffhanger for next week's show. You guys can tune in and hear us talk about what we think's next for Conor. If he's stripped by then, surely he'll be stripped by then as they continue to promote this Tony Ferguson versus Khabib Nurmagomedov fight for the real title. But we appreciate you joining us. Thanks for your time, Albert. It's been fun. Find us at ibtv.us or on Roku. Once again, IBTV's Takedown, the newest MMA show. This has been our first episode. Evan Hertzog, Albert Rosales from Denver, Colorado. Thank you.